Because what I understood at the age of 15, when my Black Studies teacher put Lerone Bennett's Before the Mayflower in my hand, and I learned about a ship called the White Lion for the first time, even though we all knew about the Mayflower in 1620, the White Lion had been completely erased. Even though it happened, what I understood is what they were calling history was not history at all. That all these things happened. What they were really talking about was memory, and who had the power to decide what will we remember about our country and what will we be forced to forget. And why does memory matter? Because memory determines how we see ourselves and what we allow, right? It is memory that drives narrative, and narrative that drives policy. And so if you erase the foundation that slavery played, then you try to fix Black people instead of fix the systems that have created the conditions that Black people live in, right? So that's the danger.
Yeah.
How are y'all feeling today? Don't say hi. Don't say hi. How are y'all feeling? Yes, yes, yes. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the DC Public Library. I am Ramonda Young, and my amazing husband of 22 years, Derek Young, is back here in the back. Yes. Thank you, thank you. We just actually celebrated our 22nd wedding anniversary a week ago, last Sunday, so thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just a little bit about Mahogany Books. We've been in business for 17 years, and our whole premise is how do we make Black books accessible no matter where you live? When we first started the bookstore many years ago, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and believe it or not, I grew up about 1.5 miles from Black Wall Street, and I never knew it was there. It was never taught in my school. So imagine, to my surprise, when I got to college, I went to Langston University, HBCU there, that I found out that Black Wall Street was 1.5 miles from my home. So when we talk about Black books, this is something very deep to us. This is something very sacred to us, my husband and I, to create these moments, to create these spaces, so nobody else will not know what we now know. Does that make sense? Let me hear some snaps. I get excited. Yeah. There should not be a person who doesn't know their history or access to those books that have our history in it. So that's a little bit about Mahogany Books and why we're here. I really want to shout out to the DC Public Library as our venue host. Let's give it up for them again. Yeah, thank you. And also the DC Public Library Foundation, which I'm a proud board member of. But some of the books that are here, they donated those books. So we're just grateful for their generosity and their belief in what we do here as a bookstore and what they believe in as our community. So let me get into it, because y'all did not come here to hear Ramonda. So, but thank you as well. So the other thing I want to give a big, I'm excited about is our moderator, and I want to read about Miss Gloria Edim. Gloria is an author, activist, and the founder of Well-Read Black Girl, whose mission is to use literature as a tool for advocacy, advocacy and collective empowerment. Gloria has won numerous awards for her work supporting and sustaining literature, including the 2017 Innovators Award from the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and the Madam C.J. Walker Award from the Hurston Wright Foundation. Give it up for our girl, Glory, in the building. Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely, and really quickly, as you guys post pictures, please tag Mahogany Books. Please use hashtag the 1619 Project. Also tag Well-Read Black Girl, Nicole Hannah-Jones, all those. As you take pictures, we love to see them. So now for our featured author. She means something deep to me. Ooh, and I got 3 eyelashes, so I'm gonna not try to cry them off. But our featured author is none other than Nicole Hannah-Jones. She is the Pulitzer Prize-winning creator of the 1619 Project and a staff writer at the New York Times Magazine. The book version of the 1619 Project, as well as the 1619 Project children's book, Born on the Water, were instant #1 New York Times bestsellers. Y'all need to give it up for that. This is hard to get some Black books on that list. Yes. Also, the 6-part docuseries won an Emmy for Outstanding Documentary for a Nonfiction Series. Yes, yes, yes. She's won numerous awards and also the MacArthur Fellowship, which is known as the Genius Grant. Yes, yes, yes. And currently, she also serves as the Night Chair of Race and Journalism at Howard University. I know it, that's why I paused. I was looking at y'all. The Night Chair of Race and Journalism at Howard University, where she founded the Center for Journalism and democracy. Please give it up for Nicole and Gloria. Whoop, whoop. Let's go.
The side closest to me gave me a standing ovation. Y'all just sat down.
Is it on? Is it on?
I think it's on now.
Okay. Hey, y'all. Wait, am I on? Hello? Okay, here we go. That was a little loud. That was loud. I thought we were going to have a little intro music.
Oh, some walkout music? Oh. Okay.
Hey.
Are you my friend? Are you locked in?
There you go.
Now step this way.
All right. You know, I just had to set the mood.
Right? Okay.
Because
That is true. They are not like us.
not
That is
like
true.
us.
That's true.
Happy Juneteenth.
Yes.
It's still going. It's still going.
It is.
I feel so excited to be on stage with you for many reasons, to celebrate the paperback launch, but just to celebrate you. And I have so many questions, but before we get into it, can you read for us a little bit?
Yes.
Can you just, give us the beauty of your voice and set the mood after Kendrick?
Sure. So first of all, hello. Oh, all the way back there. I'm going to focus on this side because they gave me a standing ovation. So I'm not even going to look over here. Except my chair is facing this way, so that's a little challenging. Just kidding. No, thank you. Honestly, every time I see a room of people who actually want to come out and take away from whatever other things that you have to do in your life and to talk about what are often really difficult, emotional subjects. I'm just really appreciative. I'm appreciative of DC. I'm appreciative of Ramunda and Derek. Where are y'all? They just been out here doing the work and ensuring that our communities have access to the books that speak to us. And as she knows, I always try to do my book events with Black booksellers. I think it's so important to support the work that they're doing. And I also want to shout out, of course, the DC public libraries. I talk about this. Libraries saved my life as a child. I was a nerdy-ass Black girl in Waterloo, Iowa. The library was like 6 blocks away from my house, and I used to walk to the library often. It exposed me to entire worlds that I didn't know existed, taught me when I found the book, The Joy of Sex, and I would hide in the corner. Hey, you gotta learn about everything in the library. I checked out Madonna, Like a Prayer. That was the first album I ever rented from a public library. It was a lot going on, y'all. But libraries are just so important. They are the most, besides our public schools, and even more so than our public schools, the most democratic institutions we have left.
Absolutely.
And it's just so important to support them. And I love having events in public libraries because there is no barrier to access. Everyone knows you can come into a public library. So I'm so appreciative of this library system. I'm also on the board of the Brooklyn Public Library System. We're fighting our mayor trying to cut $53 million from our libraries right now.
Yeah.
And I think when we think of all the investments that we make in policing and things that don't prevent crime, to cut from the things that actually serve our community is immoral. So I'm just grateful to be here. I wasn't planning on talking about that, but so yes, I'm going to. As we were talking backstage, Glory, the 1619 Project published 5 years ago in August, which is crazy for me to think about because as a journalist, I hate when my back is to people. I got to turn this chair, sorry. Especially the side that gave me a standing ovation. But, when you're a journalist, you hope that you'll write something that people will care about for 2 days or 3 days because you all know how it is. You have 50 tabs open on your computer and then you start reading something on your phone and you think you're going to come back to it, but you never do. So to create, a project that is tens of thousands of words on a past we have willfully not wanted to grapple with, and to know that 5 years later, people still want to come out and talk about it and read and learn and honestly grapple with that history is just amazing. Oh, sorry, this is from Malik Bookstore. I just did an event with Malik Bookstore in LA. If anybody's out there, support that Black bookstore. So I'm going to read from the opening chapter of the book, which is called Democracy. It really is the defining chapter of the book. It sets the stage for what the book is trying to argue. If you open to that page, you'll see the photo. The first photo is of my dad, Milton Hanna. There's only 2 photos in this book that are photos of people who are actually featured in the book. And one is my dad, and one is Mr. Bowling, a black man who was lynched for being successful in Alabama in the inheritance chapter. And I chose this photo, one, because this is my dad when he was serving in the military, but also my dad's time stationed in Germany as a black man was a time where he said he felt most like a man and most like an American, because as a black man in America, he had to live abroad to feel like he could be treated as an American. So I picked that photo to remind us of the sacrifice that black people have made in a country that has never wanted to treat us as full citizens. My dad always flew an American flag in our front yard. The blue paint on our 2-story house was sometimes chipped. The fence or the rail by the stairs or the front door might occasionally fall into disrepair, but that flag always flew pristine. Our corner lot, which had been redlined by the federal government, was along the river that divided the black side from the white side of our Iowa town. At the edge of our lawn, high on an aluminum pole, soared the flag, which my dad would replace with a new one as soon as it showed the slightest tatter. My dad was born into a family of sharecroppers on a white plantation in Greenwood, Mississippi, where black people bent over cotton from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, just as their enslaved ancestors had done not long before. The Mississippi of my dad's youth was an apartheid state that subjugated its black residents, almost half of the population, through breathtaking acts of violence. White residents in Mississippi lynched more black people than those of any other state in the country. And the white people in my dad's home county lynched more black residents than those in any other county in Mississippi for crimes such as entering a room occupied by white women, bumping into a white girl, or trying to start a sharecroppers union. My dad's mother, like all black people in Greenwood, could not vote, could not use the public library, or find work other than toiling in the cotton fields or toiling in white people's houses. In the 1940s, she packed up her few belongings and her 3 small children and joined the flood of black Southerners fleeing to the north. She got off on the Illinois Central Railroad in Waterloo, Iowa. Now, this is where I had to digress. Any of y'all been to Waterloo? Okay. Why? Okay, so So I digress there only because, it's not common for black folks to be from Iowa. But if you have read my favorite book of all time, which is Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, any of you read that book? My favorite book. Then you know that the migration followed the train lines. So wherever the train lines left from in the South, we followed them and we got off somewhere along that train line. So the train line from Greenwood was Illinois Central, went up to Chicago, but for some unknown reason, my grandmama did not get off in Chicago. She was like, I'm gonna stay on this train a little while longer, and we end up in Waterloo, Iowa. So Waterloo, Iowa is about 15% black, so it's blacker than the country, in a very white state. So there were not a ton of black folks, but there were still enough black folks to segregate us. And I grew up in a segregated black community. So she got off the Illinois Central Railroad in Waterloo, Iowa, only to have her hopes of the mythical promised land shattered when she learned that Jim Crow did not end at the Mason-Dixon line. Grandmama, as we called her, found a Victorian house in a segregated black neighborhood on the city's east side and then found the work that was considered black women's work, no matter where black women lived, cleaning white people's homes. Dad, too, struggled to find promise in this land. In 1962, at age 17, he signed up for the Army. Like many young men, he joined in hopes of escaping poverty, but he went into the military for another reason as well, a reason common to black men. Dad hoped that if he served his country might finally treat him as an American. The Army did not end up being his way out. He was passed over for opportunities, his ambition stunted. He would be discharged under murky circumstances and then labor in a series of service jobs for the rest of his life. Like all the black men and women in my family, he believed in hard work. But like all the black men and women in my family, no matter how hard he worked, he never got ahead. So when I was young, that flag outside our home never made sense to me. How could this black man, having seen firsthand the way his country abused black Americans, the way it refused to treat us as full citizens, proudly fly its banner? My father had endured segregation in housing and school, discrimination in employment, and harassment by the police. He was one of the smartest people I knew, and yet, by the time I was a work-study student in college, I was earning more an hour than he did. I didn't understand his patriotism. It deeply embarrassed me. I had been taught in school, through cultural osmosis, that the flag really wasn't ours, that our history as a people began with enslavement, and that we had contributed little to this great nation. It seemed that the closest thing black Americans could have to cultural pride was to be found in our vague connection to Africa, a place we had never been. That my dad felt so much honor in being an American struck me as a marker of his degradation, of his acceptance of our subordination. Now, I don't really see no young people in here. Are any young people in here? I guess it depends how you define young. Okay. I mean, besides me. I always like to point out this line for the young folks in the room. Because like most young people, I thought I understood so much when in fact I understood so little. My father knew exactly what he was doing when he raised that flag. He knew that our people's contributions to building the richest and most powerful nation in the world were indelible, and that the United States simply would not exist without us. Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful reading and just like taking us to a place where we can understand your origin story. But in the preface, you start off with this sentence, I was maybe 15 or 16 when I first came across the date 1619. But I know for a fact you had your words imprinted in a first impression of just like the power of words long before that. And so could you tell us about 1988, when you were 11 years old and your very first letter to the editor was published, and how that influenced you to then become that 15-year-old being like, what is this date, 1619?
Sure. So I guess you saying I was 11 in 1988 dispels my young comments.
Young at heart.
Though I was young once. So yeah, I know this is going to be tremendously difficult for y'all to believe because I'm so very fabulous now, but I was a painfully nerdy child. And I loved reading. My dad, even though he didn't have a lot of formal education, was a voracious reader. My mom was a voracious reader. Though mostly, Louis L'Amour Westerns and Danielle Steele novels. And we used to watch a lot of documentaries, and my dad subscribed to 2 newspapers. So every day, I would read the daily paper with my dad and our state paper with my dad. And I just remember, as a kid, when we but if we were to see black people in the newspaper, we had to go to the crime log. Mm-hmm. That the only place black people occurred was in the crime log. And we would look for the names of people we might know. And yet, because I was very nerdy or just, a thinking child, I knew that most people in my neighborhood weren't committing crimes. and that most people in my neighborhood were doing normal things that every other person was doing, and yet that wasn't reflected in the newspaper. So I pretty young started, thinking about who had control of narrative and who was writing these stories, and why was the newspaper and what we saw on the TV news so different from the reality. I was being bused to white schools by that point. I started being bused as part of a school desegregation program in the second grade. And so I also knew that the landscape of inequality, like I watched it through the school bus window. I could see everything get better when we got close to the white side of town. But I also saw that their parents worked these white-collar jobs, which to me as a child didn't seem that hard. Yeah. But their houses were all bigger and nicer. And then I'm seeing my black family and my black neighbors working really hard jobs, like meatpacking plants, coming home bloody and knuckles swollen, not being able to make a fist because they've carved beef carcasses all day, and yet their houses don't look like that, right? And I if you watch the documentary, you listen to the podcast, I talk about my Uncle Eddie. He was like my favorite uncle. He's the one who shows up at my Notre Dame graduation wearing red from head to toe. It was glorious, I have to say. Red hat, shirt, tie, pants, and gaiters. Sorry, I just meander, y'all. I'll get to the point, I promise. And so I'm seeing these hardworking folks like my uncle worked hard physical jobs, often jobs that didn't have health insurance. And he loved nice things. He had the best furniture rent-to-own could buy. And we laugh at that like he didn't know how to spend his money. But he couldn't afford those nice things any other way, and he wanted his children to grow up in a nice house. So I'm observing all of these realities versus what we're seeing. And I also came from a very politically engaged household. My mom was president of her local AFSCME union. Both of my parents were union, my grandfather. So I was watching politics. And Iowa is a place nobody cares about except every 4 years. I'm getting to the point, promise you, right? So every 4 years and now we've lost our one claim to fame because they've moved the primary, but it used to till recently every 4 years, right? Everyone cares because of the primaries. So 1988 was the year Jesse Jackson was running to become president. And 11-year-old Nikole is apparently, I don't even remember this, honestly. I don't remember writing this letter, but
The record.
It's on the record. I have proof of it. Was watching the primaries, and I remember being very enamored by Jesse Jackson. We'd never had a black president, obviously, and he just seemed like a good person, and he talked to black folks, but he also was in Iowa, like, talking to disenfranchised white farmers and telling them, he won a significant amount of the white vote in Iowa, more than they thought. But he didn't win the primary. So 11-year-old Nikole was outraged. And so I write a letter to the editor, and I say, we actually have the letter, and I said that I thought Jesse Jackson was a great candidate, and he should have gotten more support, and I thought he didn't get support because he was black. And that one day we would have a black president, whether my Iowa folks liked it or not.
Right. You predicted it early.
I did. So I dashed the letter off. I, walked down to the post office, mailed the letter, and then every day I come home and I open the paper to the opinion section to see if they printed my letter to the editor, and one day they did. And I'll never forget how that felt. Because I saw my name in the paper, and I saw me seeing something in society that I thought was unfair, particularly involving black folks, and that I could write about it. And maybe, Jesse Jackson never became president, so I couldn't change the world, but I could force people to at least have to acknowledge, this wrong or to think about it. And so I think that was the beginning of me thinking that maybe journalism was a career I might want to have. Now, I didn't know any journalists. I didn't know any black folks who had really professional careers outside of my teachers. But I did start to think that this was something I might want to do, understanding that there is a power in being able to shape narrative.
Yeah. I don't mean to keep quoting dates, but you have been a journalist for 20 years, right? And this project has been such a a lifeline for many of us because it's changed the perspective. It's now on the record. And what you're addressing really is, it's not just history, it's memory, right?
Yes.
So we're addressing erasure, which you just mentioned. Now that the project has taken on so many iterations, we are celebrating the paperback release. Like, how does it feel to be in this moment and to watch the evolution? Did you ever imagine that it would be so significant, make so many people mad? Because it has made so many folks mad. I would just love to hear, like, your moment right now, how you reflect and think about the project.
Yeah, so one, let me just say, I have the best fucking enemies.
Hey!
Like, if the people who hate me hate you, you are on the right side of history, right?
Right, there you go. There you go.
I do. I have amazing enemies. So, yeah, no, no one could have predicted what would happen once this project went into the world. No one is more in awe that 5 years later, I'm still out here every single week, speaking to people about the 1619 Project. I couldn't have imagined it. And I knew this work was important. Like, I knew, even not knowing if anyone would read it, anybody would care, if I had somehow convinced the Times to invest all of this resources into the blackest shit they ever did, like, would they, y'all gotta lighten up. Y'all gotta lighten up, y'all. Listen, I cuss a lot and I tell jokes. This is how we survive, and I say this for real. I say this for real. Listen, this work is not easy. It's been a long 5 years. I'm in a good place now, but trust me, when you have the President of the United States attacking your work, when you have sitting senators legislating against your work, when people are threatening to burn down your mother's house, like, that shit is real. And if you follow me on Twitter, I didn't always handle it well.
I feel like you handled it appropriately.
There were times I probably should have put the phone down. But now 5 years out, what I've come to understand is you don't see that type of power aligned against work that is not having impact. Yeah. You just don't. Yeah. And it has been, to me, and you're exactly right, like, people call the 1619 Project a work of history, but I correct that all the time. It's foremost a work of journalism, and more than that, it's a work of memory. Because what I understood at the age of 15, when my Black Studies teacher put Lerone Bennett's Before the Mayflower in my hand, and I learned about a ship called the White Lion for the first time, even though we all knew about the Mayflower in 1620, the White Lion had been completely erased. Yeah. Even though it happened, what I understood is what they were calling history was not history at all. Yeah. That all these things happened. What they were really talking about was memory, and who had the power to decide what will we remember about our country and what will we be forced to forget. Mm-hmm. And why does memory matter? Because memory determines how we see ourselves and what we allow, right? It is memory that drives narrative, and narrative that drives policy. And so if you erase the foundation that slavery played, then you try to fix Black people instead of fix the systems that have created the conditions that Black people live in, right? So that's the danger. Yeah. And what I've understood is, again, you see a room like this, how many times I have people say, I never learned any of this. The 1619 Project didn't unearth new history. We don't claim to have found something that no one ever knew before. But what we did was we made it in a form for a popular reader, a common reader like myself, not someone who's taken history classes. It wasn't behind, the membrane of a university. It was for my folks back home, for people who want information, but haven't been able to get it, and the way that we connect it to what's happening in the country right now. Yeah. Because the other thing we want to do is we want to, when we remember it as being completely disconnected from the reality of America today. Right. So this document called the Constitution, we have 6 justices right now who say we have to read that as an original document. We have to interpret everything about America through some shit that they wrote 200 and something years ago. That matters. But the fact that most of the men who wrote it owned our ancestors doesn't matter. Right? So some history they want to say is shaping our society every day, but other histories, particularly the histories that don't glorify the nation, that don't treat us as an exceptional nation, they want to forget. But what we have found, though, is a lot of Americans don't want to forget.
Yeah.
They didn't know they were forgetting. They were being, right, we had a forced amnesia, a mandated ignorance. And that once, it's like the red pill in the Matrix. Y'all seen the Matrix? The good one, not the new one. Once you see that, you take that red pill and you suddenly realize, I mean, for black folks, it's not astounding. Mm-hmm. Like, we know we're in a country that's working against us, but we still didn't have the math.
Yeah.
Like, most of us still couldn't tell you exactly what are the systems, how are they set up, what, you know. And so having that math is helpful. And then for people who aren't black, some of this is absolutely astonishing, right? Because you're like, I've learned the history of a country that never existed.
Yeah.
And that's what we have all collectively been lied to. And there's a power in that knowing. And so I think that is why people continue to want to engage, to grapple with, and why so many people who know they can't make a better argument because they don't have one, they're not on the side of right. Want to ban these ideas in books.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, we're about to be clapping throughout this whole conversation because everything you're saying, it resonates so much. You know, the original goal of the project was to reframe history, to make it so explicit that slavery was built on it's the foundation of everything in United States history, right? And I think about the foundational texts I read as a young person, and for me, the two books were The Narrative of Frederick Douglass, which was published in 1845, and then the other one was the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was published in 1965, right? So to be, and I'll say some dates, I was in high school in 1996, and for that to be like the moment that gave me clarity, and then to have your book come out in 2019, to give it context and make it more accessible to understand the experiences of those two books in a more contemporary viewpoint, it was so enlightening. So it makes me think about future generations, right? Like, there's not going to be a high school student that only has those two books, The Narrative and Malcolm X, to give them a level of perspective or understanding of what it means to be black in America. We now have your book, and so I want to really talk about future generations and the work that you're doing. I'm thinking about 1619, the Freedom School in Waterloo. I'm thinking about the literary salons that you're creating. I'm thinking about even the moment of handing out the magazines at Afropunk. I was there. Yeah. I was there, and I remember cutting out the magazine and putting it on my vision board to be like, oh, I need to dig further into this. Whether you're an adult, whether you're 16, whether you're 11, you are creating a space for us to understand how to model it and how to make it accessible, but also how to change policies. I'm going in a roundabout way, but I'm just really curious to hear how you feel about the work that you're doing to change young minds at this moment.
Thank you for that. I started having so many thoughts when you were asking that question, so I'm gonna get there, but sorry. It's like we're sitting in Washington, D.C. We're sitting a few blocks from a Capitol that was built by enslaved people, where they put the Statue of Freedom. Yeah. Like, the woman on top of the Capitol is the Statue of Freedom, and enslaved workers placed that on top of the Capitol. Enslaved people helped build the White House, right? You would have dignitaries coming from around the world into the Capitol, where enslaved people were being bought and sold. And they want to somehow disconnect that from the country that these people built. This is if you fundamentally believe the United States begins in 1776 with ideals of liberty, that does not explain January 6th, y'all. That does not explain the ways America is exceptional in ways we should not be proud of. Why we're the most carceral nation in the world. Right? Why we have the highest rates of child poverty of the industrialized world, the greatest income inequality, the only place where, of all the Western democracies and some places that aren't democracies like Cuba, where if you go to the doctor or not depends on if you have a job that wants to give it to you. Right. right? All of this is a legacy of slavery. And yet we've been taught that these things are disconnected. And by the way, why is that important? It's because the legacies of slavery aren't just hurting black folks.
Yes.
There's more poor white children than poor black children in America.
Yeah.
We are disproportionately poor, but numerically, there are more poor white children than poor black people, right? There are more white people without insurance than black people without insurance. When southern states, the former Confederacy, refused to expand Medicaid, right? They refused to take free government money to give poor people health care. They were fucking over a whole bunch of poor white people too.
Yeah.
But they will do that if they think they will hurt more of us.
Yes.
So if you don't understand that history, you have to understand that the legacies of slavery are corrupting, they are corroding what could be an amazing country for all of us.
Yeah.
There is enough. There's enough for all of us.
Yeah,
let's be clear.
Absolutely.
We can do... I'm the worst person to interview because I just talk about what I want to talk about.
We love
I'm
it.
the
Keep
worst.
it.
I'm the
Keep
worst
it.
person, but listen. We can do reparations, which I feel we are more morally and economically obligated to do, and also raise poor people of all race out of poverty.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you how we know. Do y'all remember this thing called the pandemic? Y'all remember that? Do you remember how when all of a sudden all of America was experiencing what black people experience regularly? Right? High unemployment rates, housing instability, inability to access health care. We printed $3 to $6 trillion overnight. Overnight. And all of a sudden, you couldn't evict people, right? We had universal housing. Anybody who wanted to go get that shot didn't have to show a lick of paper, $1, nothing. You showed up and you got the shot. We paid people income, universal income. My cousin Shamir, who's in the 1619 documentary in the Capitalism episode, started working at 15 years old. The most she ever made was when she got laid off for COVID and got that check from the government to stay at home.
Wow.
The most she ever made. And she cried about it because she was like, I have been able to save $1,000 for the first time in my life only because all these people are dying out here. That's the first time America cared about me.
Wow.
So let's be clear. This history is affecting all of us. We could all choose something different, and I do think that's the power, is it shows us that the inequality we see is constructed.
Yes.
It's not natural, it's not innate, it doesn't have to be this way. When Jeff Bezos can go to the moon just because he thought it would be cool, and thank the low-wage Amazon worker who has to pee in a jug because they won't give you a bathroom break, and he doesn't see any dissonance there, that tells you that there is a problem.
Yeah.
And so they keep us, most of us, in a perpetual state of struggle or a few paychecks away from struggle by making us think that if you help black folks who are undeserving, right? So you're going to suffer, but you're not going to ever have to suffer like them.
Yeah.
So we've got to grapple with this. Okay, now back to the question. Yes. Sorry, y'all. But listen, I got limited time on this planet. I got to say what I got to say. So they want to tell us that history is irrelevant, right? It's not.
Yeah.
Anybody in this room, I hope, understands that. And I hope when you read the 1619 book, you don't stop at the book.
Yes.
You go to the endnotes. There are 1,000 endnotes. And then start to read the primary documents and the deep historical research that is based upon. And you will blow your mind. Like, you won't be able to see America the same.
Yeah.
But not in a way that is destructive. See, that's what they say, is that if you learn this, you want to destroy America. No. We want to destroy that version of America.
Yes. Yeah.
We want to actually be the America of our highest ideals that actually loves our fellow Americans enough to say, in the richest country in the world, somebody shouldn't have to sleep on the street.
Right.
That's the America that we're trying to build here. It's a different America, but that's the right one. Now, back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
Listen,
The young people.
There aren't not that many. You look young. How old are you? Okay, never mind. Let me not call. I'm trying to.
We'll go back over there. She said.
We got to get some kids up in here. Okay, listen. I think it's important to know. Again, I come from working class people, extremely working class people in Waterloo, Iowa. I worked 2 jobs till I was 30 years old. I had a master's degree, and I was writing for the newspaper, and I was selling mattresses on the side. I had a degree from Notre Dame, and I worked full-time in college admissions, and I worked night and weekends at Subway. I say that to say, it can be easy sometimes when you see someone who has now gotten in a particular position to think that they haven't struggled or that their success was inevitable, but mine was not. And when I go home, nobody in my family lives like me. I don't go home to that. I'm like many successful people where I'm always having to send money because somebody's rent can't get paid. A family member's going to get evicted. Their car note is late. This is my reality. So if I were to get where I am and say, I have made it, I would have failed myself. I would have failed Arlena Tillman, who was born on a cotton plantation, and the best job she ever had was cleaning not the White House, the courthouse. I would have failed my father. And I would be failing my community, and frankly, I would be failing myself. Yeah. So it's always been important to me to try to be an institution builder, to try to be a door opener, to try to be like those black folks who pulled me through, who showed me a way. And so the first organization I founded was the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting. We're about to actually, crazily enough, have our 10-year anniversary soon. And this is an organization that tries to train other black reporters who want to be investigative journalists in the tradition of Ida B. Wells. Because folks did not, I never knew a black investigative reporter growing up. I didn't see a model of what I wanted to be. And my newsrooms also did not see a black woman and see someone who could be an investigative reporter. And then during the pandemic, I was talking to my best friend from Waterloo. She's an elementary school teacher. She teaches in the most segregated, high-poverty elementary school. And she was talking about how few, we all know this, how few of our kids, particularly our kids who are already the most behind in school, were logging on. They're having to share devices. Their parents were not the type of parents who had jobs who could work from home, like many of us had the luxury of doing. And I've been wanting to give back to my hometown for a long time, and I decided in that moment to found the 6019 Freedom School. And so the 6019 Freedom School is a free, thank you. It's a free after-school literacy program that takes students who are at least 2 grade levels behind in reading, and we teach them literacy through Black history. And I'm going to tell y'all a secret. There's nothing wrong with black kids. Listen. I covered education for most of my career before I started the 6019 Project, and I cannot tell you, I know all of you have heard it, how many times we've heard that black kids don't value education, black families don't value education, black kids don't want to read, black kids don't want to learn. I've never met a black child like that. Yeah. Now, I have learned black children who got the message about how we feel about their educations. Right. But if a child doesn't want to read, it's most likely that reading is a struggle. And that if you give our children the same thing you give other children, miraculously, our children achieve the same things other children achieve. Absolutely. Yeah. So that was really, I knew I wasn't doing anything special except bringing resources that I could bring and getting certified black educators to teach our kids a literacy curriculum that didn't erase them. Yeah. That didn't devalue them, where they were able to feel empowered. And one of my greatest moments in that work was, we have a chapter called the Children's March. And that's always our kids' favorite unit because you're not learning about what grown people did, you're learning about children who took part in the movement. So 2 of our scholars went to school after that unit and they staged a protest against their teacher. Now, it wasn't over nothing I would have staged a protest over, but I was like, I love that. Like, you took that lesson and went and applied your lesson in your school. So it's been, it's just so important for me to use. I don't know how long I'm going to have the platform I have. I don't know how long I'll be able to draw the resources that I can. But for as long as I can, I have to try to help build our communities, uplift our communities, understand I'm not that special. I'm just not. You know how many people I know from my own community who were just as smart as I was, worked just as hard. Some of the stuff I did, I just didn't get caught doing, right? Like, we have to be honest, right? Like, we all make mistakes. The margin of error for low-income Black people, though, is only this big.
Yes, absolutely.
So the mistakes other people can recover from, we often don't.
Yeah.
And so I'm very aware of that. And I'm very aware of the position I am. And I'm very aware of how people watch me and the messages that I send. So everything is intentional, right? Yes. The red hair, the earrings, the way I talk, the cussing, like it's all, it's not an act, but it's intentional. Mm-hmm. Like I know the uniform I'm supposed to wear. I know the dialect that I'm supposed to speak in. And I know what I was told about the type of journalism I should do if I wanted to be successful.
Right.
But to me, success is not worth it if you sell yourself out to get it.
Listen.
So we all, y'all, have power in some way. Everyone doesn't have the same platform, the same reach that I have, and I didn't always have it either, right? But we all have the ability to exercise power and influence in some way. If you're the first person in the space you're in, and you end up being the last, you fail too.
Right.
Like, don't come bragging to me about I was the first Black person to do this. I don't care. You weren't the first one qualified.
Right.
So don't be the last one, right? So we are a collective people. That we have had to be a collective people, and sometimes when we find success, we lose that.
Yeah.
We lose that sense of obligation to community. And I just try, like, in where I live, as you know, where I send my daughter to school, in choosing to reject UNC and come to Howard and build an institution there. It's just to send that message.
I do feel like we're in church because we got the fans, we got the clapping. There's a lot of call and response. If you're watching online, there's so much yes.
We don't got no church wine.
Yeah, we can work on that. We will be taking questions in a second, so you can marinate. I'm gonna ask one more question, and if you have a question, just please raise your hands. We'll bring Mike over. Okay, so my last question for you is regarding the contributors, because you are the beautiful representative of this project, but you work in tandem with so many profound, incredible people. You know, one of my favorite essays was the one Dorothy Roberts wrote. Yes. Kevin Cruz with the traffic piece. Like, there were just so many things that, like, I kept returning to and going through the ed notes and, like, going through just to make sure that I could get a deeper understanding of the history. Can you tell us just the evolution of the project with the contributors and what it's been like to, like, see them also advocate on your behalf and work with them closely?
Yes, I am the face of the project, but the project does not exist without the dozens of writers, most of them descendants of the institution of slavery, but not all of them. And I knew when I conceived of it that it had to be a project that no person should have the hubris to think that you could tell the 400-year story of a people, that it had to be a collective telling. And so when I first pitched it, we had, I just basically created the wish list of scholars, writers, artists whose work had influenced mine, and we brought them to the Times, and we just held a massive brainstorming session with the conceit of the project. The conceit of the project always was to take modern American institutions and show the surprising connections to slavery. So if you open to the table of contents, all the essays have a single word title, because I want you just reading the table of contents to be overwhelmed by all the ways that slavery is shaping our society that we haven't thought about, like traffic, right? Like when you're sitting in Atlanta or Chicago or Detroit or DC, and you're like, I could see my exit and it's gonna take me 30 minutes to get to it. This does not make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense if traffic, highways were built to move people quickly through a city. But it does make sense if highways were built as a physical barrier to keep black communities divided off from white communities, which is what has happened, right? So when you go through Atlanta and you realize that that poorly designed traffic system was because they wanted to create physical barriers to segregate black communities, then it starts to make sense. So all of that, you had to have, just a wide range of writers, different types of writers. There's journalists, there's historians, there's sociologists. So being able to be in conversation with them, to learn from them, to go back and forth through the iterations and the editing process, has just been the greatest honor of my life. And that so many people, especially once the project published, and it lived in the world, and I could go back to folks that I couldn't get in the first project or didn't have time. They made time the second time around. And Dorothy Roberts, the race essay was one. There were certain essays that I knew I needed in there. One of my favorites is the essay Dispossession by Taya Miles. She's an Afro-Indigenous scholar at Harvard. I knew there was a hole in the original project in that we didn't deal with settler colonialism. I wasn't quite sure how to do it in a project about African slavery. She did a perfect job of that. Just so many. But I want to also just quickly, I want to read something from the scholar Saidiya Hartman, because we talk a lot about the essays, but there's also short fiction and poetry, which is also, every part's my favorite part, but I really love the short fiction and poetry. And that one gave us the opportunity to invite writers who you normally wouldn't see in a text like this, right? So Terry McMillan, who I grew up loving reading her novels.
We all did.
Right? But you wouldn't typically see her in a nonfiction book about slavery. Yeah. Or Barry Jenkins, who is the Oscar-winning director of Moonlight, has a short piece of prose in there. And what that came from was, because the project isn't a history, we're not trying to tell a comprehensive story of America from 1619 to 2019. But we also understood Americans learned this history so poorly. There's just so much left out that people just don't know. So we started talking about, should we make a timeline of some sort? Yeah. But then we said, well, what if we allowed black scholars, black writers to reimagine moments in history? Because black Americans, of course, are the only people in the history of the United States whom were ever barred by law from reading and writing. What that means then is we have less documentary evidence than other groups have. Yeah. We don't have as many of the letters going back and forth between family members. We don't have as many of the books of history and poetry being written by our folks. And so we have it, but it's not as much. And so often when we have to read about these histories, we have to read about them through the white lens. Yes. And we wanted to reimagine. And I was actually at this art exhibit that was opening at the LACMA in LA a few weeks ago, and I came across this concept by Saidiya Hartman that I was like, this is exactly what we were trying to do. We didn't have a word for it. And she called it critical fabulation.
Oh, I love that.
I love that, right? And she said, it's a strategy that invites historians, artists, and critics to creatively fill in the gaps of history, provides a resonant framework for approaching work, that in order to tell the truth, you need to invent what might be missing from the archives. And this is actually not Saidiya Hartman. This is the curator now saying how she translated that. Yeah. You need to invent, the artist saying how she translated that. In order to tell the truth, you need to invent what might be missing from the archive, to collapse time, to concern yourself with issues of scale, to formally move things around in a way that reveals something more true than fact. Think about that, something more true than fact. So while Barry Jenkins didn't witness that event that he writes about, the fact that we were never able to get that event through a black lens means he's actually writing something more true than fact. So that's why I love that part of the book as well.
I love that. It's like you're speaking to the emotional resonance, right? Like, what is the interior life of everything? And I'm so glad you brought up the different authors, because in this book, you have Z.C. Packer, you have the playwright Lynn Nottage, you have Yaa Gyasi, like you have so many. Rita Dove,
Sonia Sanchez, who writes the very last poem in the book. Yes.
Every single Claudia Rankin, like this is not only again, it's correcting the record, but it is just such a beautiful tribute of just like Black literary greatness and beauty and just expansiveness. And I think everyone in this room, because all the yes, it's because we just agree and love you so much. And thank you for just like creating this work, bringing us all together. Yes, we can clap for that. It is just really. It's really an honor. And also the fact that we can laugh too, right? These are hard things, but we can laugh and we can cuss and we can be ourselves. We can just show up truly how we want to show up, and there's no performance in it. It's just like a realness. And so I'm really honored to be in conversation with you, to be your friend, just to do this with you, to do the work. And so now, as I promised, we will do, I know we're going over time. Are we doing questions? Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right, we're not doing questions, but she's going to personally sign each of your books. She's going to put her signature in it, and I'll do a photo. So if you have your phone out, well, once we get to the signing here, we will do that.
Yes.
We're about to go rogue.
We're going scripts.
We're gonna. No, I'm going rogue. We're doing 2 questions.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, this is gonna hurt.
I'm the one that has a flight to miss.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start with this first one.
All right, if I miss my flight, somebody's driving me back to New York. That's all I'm saying. Just only time for 2, though.
First person, I'd like to say thank you so much for being born and being here.
Amen.
My question very quickly is, where do you see this project 5 and 10 years from now? What would you like to see?
Oh, amen. That's a good one.
That's a great question. I have learned one thing as a journalist: I never try to predict the future, because I just don't like to be wrong. But my hope is that this project, along with the activism, generations of activism by Black folks, will lead to reparations. I'm just trying to do my part. My role is narrative. There's other folks who, have to write the laws. There's other folks who have to, be on the ground protesting and engaging in grassroots activism. But I try to create the narrative that makes these dreams possible. And I always say, the very last chapter of the book is called Justice. It is an argument for reparations. It is saying if you read the book from the first page to the last, and you are a thinking person with a heart, you can only come away with one conclusion, which is that we are owed a great debt, and that this country needs to pay it. So that's my hope. Now, I won't say what will or will not happen, but I will say never in my lifetime has reparations been taken more seriously as a political issue. There's a reparations bill that's literally moving through the Senate in California. Illinois now has established an official state reparations commission. New York has established an official state reparations commission. We just have to convince people that not only is this the right thing to do for Black folks, but it's the right thing to do for America.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing everything that you've said so far. I did have a question about memory, and it refers back to the question that was asked about the role that fiction has played in the text. I was wondering, besides being able to be used in order to reconstruct evidence that's missing from our record, what role has fiction played in memory in terms of how it's used in the text? And also, if you could speak to personally, if the relation between fiction and memory has been able to help you or other people in your life be able to manage the stress that comes with talking about this work and doing this work.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question.
Okay, question.
I know, I'm like, that was deep. Clearly, fiction plays a massive role in shaping memory, whether for good or for ill, right? If we contemplate that the highest grossing movie of all time was Gone with the Wind, if we contemplate that the very first feature-length film in the United States was Birth of a Nation, then we understand the role that fiction has played in justifying anti-Blackness, in creating the narrative for anti-Blackness. And in fact, Birth of a Nation led to the resurgence of the Klan. Birth of the Nation justified the Black codes and racial apartheid laws that followed the end of Reconstruction. But I also think, of course, fiction can have the opposite effect. And this is surely why we see the book bans, right? That fiction gives us an imagination for what is possible. It allows us to build new worlds. It allows us to rethink the worlds that we think we know, and that is so powerful. I didn't always just, now I mostly don't have a lot of time for fiction. I mostly read, for research. But I remember the first time I saw Black fiction books, so I was bused to white schools, and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
Yes.
And I was like, there's a Black girl on the cover. So I had to read that book, and I saw myself. And I'd never seen myself in a fiction book before. Right, so I do think, like, if you don't come from a marginalized group, you don't understand how that erasure shakes your psyche and shapes your inability to see your own self as fully human. So fiction is critical. And like I said, being able to have fiction writers who could reimagine these moments through our heart, our gaze, our love, was so critical to the book. And I don't know, are you a writer?
Yes.
Okay.
Claim it.
Do you write fiction?
Right now I write for myself. Mostly, I've started writing to read the past. My mother was a high school teacher and taught me the power of reading. So right now it's more of a morning exercise, Thank you so much, because it certainly has shaped, and words continue to shape the way that I have a relationship with myself and the way I'm able to communicate myself to others. So it's just really powerful to hear you speak on that.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry about your mother. I could feel the pain of what you're going through, and I'm sure everyone in here has experienced a devastating loss at least one time. And that's when I find myself writing. It's so interesting that you say that, because when I started writing the democracy essay, I didn't intend to write about my dad at all. This was not a personal essay. And I just kept coming back to him and wanting to understand this man that I did not understand. And it was through that I started thinking about my dad and this flag, and through reading, words of Frederick Douglass or Martin Delany, like Black folks who were like, we're not leaving this country, we built it, it's our land. And thinking, if you could have been enslaved in this country and still claim this country, that my dad was tapping into a legacy and an understanding that I was incapable of having, really until I wrote the essay. So I feel like the work that you're doing is also going to help you understand with a depth the relationship with your mom that you probably couldn't even process except through the writing. So keep writing, and maybe you're writing for yourself now, but maybe one day you'll be writing for us too.
Nicole Hannah-Jones. Very much.